All right then, so now we are going to discuss about the looping statements. So let's go ahead over here and clean up all the codes over here. So right now, let me open the comments, multi-line comment. All right, so here we need to understand what is basically loop. So loop in the sense it's kind of repeating the same actions over again and again and again, right, until a certain time. So that's the loop. So just like the same way, we're going to use the looping statements to repeat the same actions, to repeat the same actions or the block of codes for several number of times in a sequential way, That's the usage of the looping statements. So we do have two different categories of the looping statements. One is the entry check loop, which is your for and while loop, and another one is the exit check loop, which is your do while loop. So let's understand the entry check loop first. So basically the entry check loop, which is it will check the condition. It will always verifies the condition, and then if the condition is satisfied, then it will execute the loop. So when it comes to entry check loop, the statements are executed. Statements are executed only if the looping conditions are satisfied, right? So that's how the entry check loop will work. So the entry check loop will execute the statements only if the given conditions are satisfied. That's how the entry check loop works, and it will always follows the 4 different stages, right? So it will follow the 4 different stages. The stage number 1, which is going to be your initialization. The second one is going to be your condition. It's going to verify that condition. So once the stage is true, the condition is true, this condition should be true, right? So only if the condition is true, then the third statement, which means the looping statement, will get executed, and the fourth stage is going to be the increment or decrement. All right, in this situation we need to understand what is increment and decrement. So basically the increment, in the sense increase the value by the count 1. So we have to use this plus operator, and the decrement is exactly quite opposite to the increment, so that will decrease the value by the count 1. So we have to use this minus operator, right? So this is all about the increment and decrement. All right, so now let's take it into the action. So let's talk about the for loop syntax first. For loop. So for loop will follow the exact same 4 stages. So for, open it. What is the first stage? Initialization. Come on, so we have to use the semicolon to break the stage 1. Then initialize. Spelling mistake, my bad. And what's the second stage? Condition, semicolon. And here we need to supply the 4th stage, increment or decrement. Close it, open it, yeah, close it. And the third stage, it's going to be the statement. So basically this is your stage 1, stage 2, this is stage 4, and this is going to be your stage 3. So the value will get initialized, the initialized value will get verified. If it is verified successfully, the third stage will get executed and the fourth stage will be get executed. For instance, let's say that we are trying to print the number from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or something. So I'm going to write a program hash include stdio.h and int main, open the loop main function, and here I'm just going to define the value as int I. That's all I need. So I'm going to start the for loop. I value should start from 1 because that's the place where we are trying to start. Then I value should go until it's reached 5. So it should start from 1 and it should go until 5. That's the condition that we are trying to apply. Then the fourth stage is going to be the increment because we are starting it from the lowest value. Think about it, if you're starting from the highest value, then you need to reduce the value, right? From 5 to 0. What do you need to do? We need to decrement the value. Now we are starting it from 1 and I need to go until 5. So I need to increment the value. So here all I have to do is to print of %d / m I value, and at the end semicolon. If you run this program, now you will get the output as 1 2 3 4 5, right? So let me explain you how exactly it's printing that output. So let's talk about what is the condition that what's the looping that we returned over here. Let me paste it here. This is the looping that we returned, right? So how it will start? What is the first stage? Initialization. So I will get initialized as 1. What is the second stage? Condition. So I less than or equals to 5. What is the current I value? 1. So 1 less than or equals to 5. According to this condition is true. So what's the statement that we are trying to do? We are trying to do is to print the I value. So what is the current I value now? 1. 1 will get printed on the screen. Then what is the fourth stage? Increment. I plus plus. So output will be 1 plus plus will change to 2. So the I value will be reinitialized as 2. So it will try to check the condition I less than or equals to 5. So 2 less than or equals to 5 condition gets true. So the 2 will get printed on the screen. Then it will go for the fourth stage I plus plus. Current I value is 2 plus plus. So the 2 will become what? 3. So the same I value get reinitialized. I equals to 3. Then I less than or equals to 5, that's the condition. Current I value is 3, so 3 less than or equals to 5. So condition gets true. The third stage 3 will be printed on the screen. Then it will go for fourth stage, which is I plus plus. So the I plus plus will become 3, which means the current I value is 3. So 3 plus plus will become 4, right? Then again the I value will be reinitialized to 4. Then it will check the condition I less than or equals to 5. Then it will actual I value is 4 equals to 4 less than or equals to 5. Condition is true. So the 4 will get printed on the screen. Then it will jump to the fourth stage, that's the increment stage, which is 4 plus plus is equal to 5. It will become 5, right? That's what happens when you try to increment the 4 plus plus. Then I value will be reinitialized as 5. So I less than or equals to 5, that's the condition. So according to the condition, 5 less than or equals to 5, condition is satisfied. So the I value gets printed as 5 and it will jump to I plus plus. So the 4 plus plus will become, sorry, the 5 plus plus current value is 5, right? So the 5 plus plus will become 6. So according to this, the I value gets reinitialized to 6. So I less than or equals to 5, that's the condition. Current I value is 6. So 6 less than or equals to 5. Condition gets false. So the loop will be terminated. So the final output on the screen will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is how you will get this output. So this is how your looping statement will get executed, mainly the for loop. All right, so this is how the entry check loop will work. The 4 stages. This is what you need to keep it in your mind: initialization, condition, statement, and increment or decrement. So this is how exactly the same way your while loop will also work. So if you talk about the while loop, the syntax of the while loop is going to be condition, open it, statement. So the remaining 2 things are missing. What are the 2 things are missing? That's your initialization stage and the increment or decrement is missing. Compared to while loop and for loop, so while loop is the most dangerous loop when compared to your for loop. The reason why I'm saying is, think about that if you fail to increment your value, the while loop will constantly repeat the same value, so the loop will never end. So because there is no possibility to increase the value from 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So it will always stuck in the same value. The loop will become infinite, right? So that's the reason I'm saying when you're working with while loop, you should be very careful what value that you're trying to do the increment. If you fail to do increment or decrement, you are stuck in that place, right? So that's the reason while loop is the most powerful and the dangerous loop when compared to your for loop. But for loop, it's the strongest loop and it's the fastest loop when compared to while loop, right? Because we know the exact destination when I need to stop. Only if I know, then the for loop will get start the loop, right? That's the reason the for loop is quite faster than the while loop. All right, so now here we are missing the initialization stage and the increment stage. So let's see how to do the same stuff over here. So first, what is the first stage? Initialization. So I'm going to initialize the value as 1 manually. So first stage is done. What is the second stage? While condition. So I should be less than or equals to 5. If you say so, what I need to do? I need to print the I. Print it. Third stage is completed. What's the fourth stage? Increment. So let's see if I fail to increment the value. See here what's happening. See, it's constantly printing the values. Keep on printing. So this will keep on printing that same value until your system will get overflow, which means it will shut down. Until your memory gets overflow, and this will run into, it will force your PC to shut down, right? Because if there is no and not enough memory in your RAM, what happens? You can't process. So RAM will start shut down the PC. This is what happened. So that's why you need to give the increment value. So the reason why I'm saying here is because at the very first point, I value will be 1, right? So 1 less than or equals to 5. Condition gets true. So the value gets printed. Think about it if you fail to do this. What is the current I value now? 1. Because there is no possible way to increment that I value from 1 to 2. So I value will constantly be on the same value. So the loop will repeat with the same value again and again and again until it gets crashed, right? That's the reason we are using the increment value. Now after this point, 1 will become 2. So 2 less than or equals to 5, condition true. 2 will become 3, 3 will become 4, 4 will become 5, and 5 will become 6. At some point the condition will get failed over here. So the while loop will exactly work in the same way as the for loop, right? So this is what your entry check loop, which is a simple example which helps you to understand how efficiently the looping, the entry check loop will works. On the other hand, let's discuss about the exit check loop. Exit check loop. So the exit check loop, which executes the statements first. So the statement will be executed at least once, even if the condition fails, because that's how the exit check loop will work, because the condition will always be checked at the end, right? So exit check loop, it will execute the statement at least once, even if your given condition is fails, right? So think about it. So the stage is ordered. This is also will undergo the 4 different stages. First stage, of course, it's going to be the initialization, and the second stage, it's going to be your statements, and the third stage, it's going to be your increment or decrement. The fourth stage, it's going to be your condition, because condition will be verified at the end, right? This is how this the exit check loop will work, right? So let's try to do that same thing over here. So I'm going to assign the value as I is equals to 1 again. Then I'm going to do we need to understand the syntax, right? So do statements, you need to give the statements, then I need to supply the condition over here. How? While the condition. This is the syntax of the do while, brackets, right? This is the syntax. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to do the printf. So Initialization is done, statement is done. The second stage, what the third stage? Increment or decrement, it's done, right? Now, what's the fourth stage? That's the condition. When I need to do this stuff, while I less than or equals to 5, semicolon, right? Say the changes, and now if you run this, you will get the exact same thing 1, 2, 3, 4 at the end. Let's try to understand how exactly this is working. So, according to the stages, what is the initialization? I is equal to 1. And then the condition, the state initialization is part is done. What is the second stage? It will print the value 1 and it will go for I plus plus. That means I value will become what? 1, right? From 1, it will become to 2. So 1 plus plus will become 2. And then finally it go for condition. What is that? I less than or equals to 5. What is the current I value? 2 less than or equals to 5. What is that? Given condition is true. So then it will go for what? I is equals to 2. So then it will print the value as 2. Then it will go for I plus plus. So I plus means 2 plus plus will become what? 3. Now it will try to verify that 3, whether the given value 3 is matching, is verifying this condition or what. So 3 less than or equals to 5. So that's like the same way it will goes on. So think about it. If I given the value was minus 1, right? Like if I given the value as minus 1, so instead of checking this specific condition, if I'm trying to check minus 1, so I equals to 1, that's the initialization, then it will go and print the value, then it will go for I plus plus. What is the current I value? 1. 1 plus will become what? 2. What is the condition that we are trying to verify? I less than or equals to should be minus 1, right? So according to it, 1 less than or equals to minus 1. The given condition is false, right? Because 1 is greater than minus 1. So even though if this condition is failed, how many times the loop gets executed? Only one time. One time the loop gets executed even if your condition is failed. The reason happening is because the condition will always verified at the end. So that's the reason the exit check loop will execute your statement at least once, even if your condition gets failed, right? So this is what happens when you're trying to use the exit check loop. So that's the reason in the modern programming languages like Python, we never use the we don't have this exit check loop, right? So on the next, what we are going to do, we are going to use this loops in a more efficient way with the different sets of examples. So that's what we are going to do next. And keep it in mind, looping plays the crucial parts when you're working with arrays. So you need to understand the loops much more better. Instead of memorizing the code, you need to understand its syntax and how the way the loop gets work, right? So that's the reason we are having this simple example to understand how exactly it's working. So next, what we are going to do, how to use this loop in a more efficient way. So that's what we are going to do next. All right, then. So now what we are trying to do here is now we are trying to print a star pattern. We are trying to print a triangle just by using stars. All right. So you need to understand how exactly we can do it. So what I'm trying to do is, so we are trying to do like, now we need to print, let's say I need to print 5 rows triangle and I need to create a triangle with the 5 different rows. So let me show you the shape first. All right. So this is how that we are trying to print a star pattern. Okay. So you need to understand how we can do this by using the for loop, right? It's very simple. So just like the same way we did for the nested if, we need to use the nested for loops over here. So first we need 3 different loops. Why we need 3 different loops? Keep it in mind. First loop is need to keep track in what line number that we are. And the second loop, we need to check how many spaces that I need to add. And the third loop to print these stars. Okay. So over here, we can achieve this by using three different sets of loops. As I said, the first loop is to keep tracking the number of lines. So think about it that you are in the line number 1. So in the line number 1, I know for the triangle, for the top will be the lowest number of stars, and at the bottom we need to have the highest number of stars. So to start in the first line, I need to print only one star, right? So before printing the star, first I need to leave the number of spaces, like the n-1 spaces, right? Think about it that if you are trying to print the 5 rows, so in the line number 1, I need to leave 4 empty spaces and 1 star, right? Because total 5 rows, so n-1 means 4. So the spaces needs to be there by 4 different spaces and only 1 star. That's what we need to do. So you can see space 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. In the fifth line, in the fifth space, we are having the star. And if you check the second one, the line number will get reduced. So 4 will become 3. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 spaces and 4 and 5 will be the star. So this is how you need to do, right? So the n-1 spaces should be there and the number of stars need to be printed in that specific line itself, right? So let's use the nested loop to achieve this. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to delete this, and I need to create different loops, right? One loop is going to constantly running, which means the first loop is the row will constantly running, and inside that loop the another loop is going to be 2 different loops. It's going to be started and executed. So we need one more variable to monitor that loop, and we need the variable how many number of row that I need to create. So here now first I need to read the number of rows from the user. Printf /n, enter the number of rows. Number of rows, colon, semicolon, scanf, %d, comma, ampersand, row, and semicolon. Now we need to start the loop. So we need to start the loop. First we need to keep track the number of rows, right? So for that, for I should start from the 1. Okay, then I less than or equals to rows, semicolon, then I plus plus, open the loop. So this loop will keep tracks the number of the rows, in what particular line number that you are. Then first we need to print the space. So first we need to print these spaces. So for that I'm going to start one more loop. For j is going to be 1 and j should be less than or equals to row minus 1. So if it is 5, we need to print 4 different spaces. If it is 4, we need to print 3 different spaces. So every time you need to print n-1 spaces. So j plus plus, open it. I need to print an empty space. So printf an empty space, semicolon, right? Then after this, what we need to do, we need to print the stars. Print the stars. So for again j equals to 1 and j should be less than or equals to 2 times of I minus 1. Okay, then j plus plus, open it and print f. We need to print the star, semicolon. Once this is successfully done, we need to move on to the next line. Move to the next line. So if you forget this, it will constantly printing the same action in a single line itself. So printf /n. You should jump to the next line. So once everything is done, once this loop is done, I need to return the 0, save the changes. Now if I run this, if I give 5, okay, so we having a mistake over here. What is the mistake that we made? J is equals to 1. I equals to 1, I less than or equals to the row, and I plus plus, and the condition j is equals to 1, and the j less than or equals to row. Okay, my bad, it's not supposed to be 1. That's the reason we are making the mistake. Okay, so if it is first line, you need to see here, we need to make it n minus 1. If you keep n minus 1, what happens? If it is 5, you will get 4 lines. So if you're moving on to the next line, right, you are in the second line. So at that point, you need to reduce 2 spaces, not 1 space. That's the mistake we made. So instead of going n minus 1, you need to go n minus I. Right? Even the first line, you need to go 5 minus 1, what? 4. And in the second line, you need to go 5 minus 2, what? 3. And in the third line, you need to go 5 minus 3, what? 2 spaces. So this is how you need to move on, right? Save these changes. And now if you run this, if you give 5, look at that, right? So this is how you need to use the for loop. So there are n number of start patterns that you can understand. So you can search, simply Google it. You can figure it out. There are lots and lots of start patterns to understand and improvise your logical thinking just by using the for loops. So that will really helps you to hone your logical thinking, right? So please choose any example, go and search and find a start pattern and try to figure it out how exactly it's working and everything, right? So this is how you need to use the for loop. So now take your time and use the same program and convert this for loop into while loop. So that really helps you to understand the program, right? So without wasting your time further, let's move on to the next concept. All right then, so now let's start discussing the break and continue statements. What is the usage of break and continue statements? So let me clean up the code and let me create the multi-line comment. And now what we are going to do, we are going to discuss about the break and continue statements. Break and continue. So basically in the C programming, the break and continue statements are used in the loops to control the flow of the program. They are used in the loops to control the flow of the program. So in that thing, the very first we are going to discuss about the break statement, right? So basically the break statement is used to exit the loop. Just like the same way when we use the break statement in the switch, what happens? It will forcefully push the user or push the compiler to exit the switch statement. Just like the same way, the break statement will always helps you to exit the loop permanently, right? So when you encountered inside a loop, for instance, while or for or do while, whatever it is, it immediately terminates the loop and the program execution continues with the next statement after the loop, right? So this is what happens when you're using the break statement. So now let's write a simple program to understand how the break statement will work. So here hash include stdio.hatch and int main, open it, int I, let's define the int I. So for I equals to 1, then I less than or equals to 10, then I plus plus, right? So what I'm trying to do is, if I value is equals to 5, which means it's reached that breaking point, printf breaking out of the loop. So breaking out of the loop at I equals to %d slash in, then comma I. So we are just going to print it at what point that we are trying to break it out of the loop. So after this, I'm going to make it break. If not, this will keep on continuing doing this stuff. Current value of I is equals to %d and add the slash n at the end, then comma I value. So after this, I'm just going to say return 0. So this loop will constantly printing the value from I and so on, 1, 2, 3, 4. But and inside the loop, I return one condition. Once the I value reaches the end value as 5, that means once it reaches the breaking point, I'm going to print this statement, breaking out of the loop at I equal to what the value is. And I'm going to add this break statement. So this will forcefully break this loop. All right. So now if I run this, you can see current value 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the once the I value is equals to 5, it's showing breaking out of the loop I equals to 5, right? So this is what happens when you're using the breaking statements. So the break statement, what does it do? It's used to exit the loop permanently. So that's what happened over here, right? So I hope you understand the break statement now much clearly. All right, so now let's jump to the continue statement. Continue statement. So basically in the C program, the continue statement is used to skip the rest of the loop, right? It's used to skip the rest of the loop body and move to the next iteration of the loop, right? So it often used to bypass the certain iteration based on the specific condition. That's the usage of the continue statement. So continue statements is used to skip the rest of the loop body and to move to the next iteration of the loop, right? So it is often used to bypass the certain iterations, based on a specific condition, right? So that's the usage of the continue statement. All right, so now let's write a simple program to understand it, how exactly it's working. So let's keep the same for loop over here. We don't want to delete that. So for, I'm going to open the for, right? So I'm going to start the I value from 1, and I'm going to keep I value I less than 10 and I plus plus. Open the loop, right? So I'm going to check if the I value is equals to 3. So at this point, I need to skip this iteration. So printf skipping the loop at I value equals to %d, comma I, and leave it as in the new line. And I'm just going to say continue semicolon. If not, I'm just going to print the current value of the I. So let's say current value of I equals to %d slash n, comma I value, semicolon. All right. And if everything is fine, it will be written 0, save the changes. Now, if you execute this, so here you can see this is the breaking point, which is for the break statement. From here, we are starting current value. Okay, value, I think I misspelled it. Okay. I is equals to 1, 2, I equals to 2, and at the third, if the I value is equals to 3, we need to skip that part. So we are skipping at that particular location, and then we are continuing it from the next iteration. So this is how the continue statements will work. So we are skipping at this point, and it simply skip that particular iteration and it's moving on to the next part. It's not executing this lines of code after this particular point, right? It simply skips these lines and it will move on to the next iteration of the loop. Instead of breaking it, it skips at that particular point and move on to the next iteration. So that's the advantage of having the continue statement, right? So this is the difference between the break and the continue statement. So will really helps you to understand the simple example will helps you to understand the break and the continue state.